Welcome in episode 4, Modern Symposium. I'm Nick Kamholz. My counterpart, Richie Mira, is here. Today, we kind of want to talk about something, always on everyone's minds. It's the future, what we think the future might look like, thoughts, questions, concerns, predictions. So I think I'll start it off here. One concern I have for the future is the growing presence of uh, security issues, in the cyber world, growing issues of your own personal data being used and exploited. I think that could very easily turn into something of a dystopian Big Brother, something we got to look out for. One positive I'm looking forward to is hopefully, with growing social media, that people all around the world can seamlessly interact with each other with, better translators, AI translators. And if people all around the world start talking, hopefully, people can start looking, towards building a better future, communicating. How do we help all countries instead of just our countries? What do you got, Richie?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think one of the things we're looking into here coming up in, either the near or long future, but I bet it's sooner than we think, is we are approaching a situation of a potential surveillance state where we're basically on the verge of digitizing almost everything. And there's tons of ways that can go horribly wrong if not managed by the right people. So that's something definitely to fear, as well as, with rising geopolitical tensions, you advanced weapons, AI, that type of thing, if used for the wrong reasons, could be I'd say, pretty detrimental to humanity as a whole. But on the pro side, one of the things I like that it gained a lot of steam for a while. It's been on a little bit of a winter. I haven't heard about it as much in the media lately, but the advancements in blockchain, I think, have a huge potential to save us a ton of problems. Some of the problems we're currently already facing, and some of the problems that we might face in the future as these other emerging technologies get more and more advanced. And I think even though a lot of people think of blockchain as cryptocurrency and just some digital form of money, I think there's a lot of other purposes that it could be used for as well that would be pretty beneficial to democracy and humanity as a whole.
Last episode, we talked about government on the blockchain potentially. Uh, how would that work for, people who aren't as familiar as blockchain as we are?
Right. Yeah. And so what blockchain is, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but just as kind of a brief, in layman's terms, what it basically is it's a decentralized platform that currently is used for currencies. There's video games that are run on blockchains. There's voting mechanisms that are run on blockchains. And the quality of it is that it's entirely decentralized, where there's no one person who owns the network and can manipulate the network, who can hoard all of the data. It is a decentralized network. So everyone participates in it. They own their own node in the network. And there's extremely brilliant encryption techniques and algorithms that are used so that all of the participants in the network each have a say in what goes on in the network. And so, one of the great things about Bitcoin, for example, is that there is no central bank who is printing off Bitcoin, and there's no one at the top of the chain who is hoarding all of it, or who can control, what happens with it. The rules of the Bitcoin um, blockchain are set in stone and can only be changed if everyone who participates in the network decides to vote on that change. And what that means is that if you own any amount of Bitcoin, you can use that Bitcoin to vote on what happens with the rules of the game they're playing. If
Let,
everyone decided, go ahead.
let me jump in right there. Again, on last episode, we kind of talked at the very end, we brought up, if the government is put into a legislative app, should it then be direct democracy or should it be still representative, right? Should it just be a vote is a vote is a vote versus representative republic? So why in this situation is it better than for a decentralized currency instead of a centralized currency? Why is it better to have uh, need say something needs to be changed in the Bitcoin mining process? Well, it's decentralized. Someone with a strong hand can't come in and say, okay, this is something we need to put in to safeguard this currency in the future. If it's decentralized, couldn't that pose a problem in the future if no one group can, influence something in a timely manner?
That is a good point, and that's actually one of the things that is being worked on with Bitcoin, and one of the problems why it's not as scalable as they would like it to be is because it is very difficult to get anything done in a timely manner when you've got this many people who all have a say. That's a great point, actually. But counter to that point, there's a pro and a con to it. That's the bad side. The pro side is that because of that, it's transparent and there's almost a zero chance of corruption. They refer to, I believe they call it the 50% takeover as one of the potential threats to Bitcoin. And what that means is that one entity or group of people would have to have control over 50% of the nodes on the Bitcoin network in order to alter a transaction. And so that's the only way where someone could hack into Bitcoin is if they had ownership over 50% of the nodes and they chose to kind of take over and redirect the rules of the chain. Now, when we're talking about rules, keep in mind these are hard-coded rules. This is an algorithm. So there's no one who's there to enforce the rules. The rules enforce themselves.
And we can all see where the perils of centralized economies comes from, right? One group of powerful people holding sway over monetary policy doesn't sound amazing to anyone, I don't think. As Rothschild said, allow me to manage the printing of currency in the government, and I care not what laws are passed. It's
Exactly.
an,
That's exactly right. And
an incredibly powerful tool. Cool. Go ahead.
no, that's exactly right. I was just agreeing, and that's exactly the purpose of blockchain in general is to make it so that there is no one who could possibly own those, who can manage the economy and make up the rules. The rules are set in stone, they're hard coded in, and they're voted on by everyone who participates in the network.
Interesting. Onto the social credit system. Like a surveillance state we could be approaching. Would there be any benefits? I mean, again, the negatives are pretty starkly apparent. Uh, no one wants the government spying on every single thing that they do. Could there be an argument to be made for, a social credit system?
I would say yes. I mean, there's definitely trade-offs. If there was no benefit, then it probably wouldn't even be on the table. There's definitely a benefit, and I don't think that the benefit outweighs the concerns as far as invasion of privacy and kind of, just yeah. I mean, once you get to a social credit system, you're one step removed from a mass surveillance state similar to that of 1984. And that's if you follow it to its logical conclusion. But when it comes to a social credit system, I mean, we're already starting to see the first steps of a social credit system being implemented. The more we rely on digital platforms to do everyday things and interact with others, then the more of a social credit system we're starting to take baby steps into. An example would be Uber, where we're able to rate the drivers. And as a passenger, you're able to rate the driver, and the driver is able to rate the passenger. Now, a passenger who has a lower rating is less likely to be prioritized in the queue when they are looking for a ride. And a driver who has a lower rating is less likely to get the first offer when someone is looking for a driver. Same thing goes for Airbnb, where if you're a guest on Airbnb and you're looking to stay in an Airbnb, your score will be shown to the owner of the property, and they will likely charge you more because you're higher risk if you have a lower score. Or and the same goes for the owner of the property. If they have a lower score, their property is not going to show up at the top of the list when I'm looking for a place to stay in, say, Chicago. They're gonna, you're gonna have to scroll pages
So
down to find them.
So how do you feel about that for Airbnb and Uber? In a free market society, naturally better businesses would get naturally better reviews from word of mouth. People would then buy those products or services more. Isn't that just like survival of the fittest, competition in a sense? And isn't that better that people are then having a say in representing which businesses or which producers of goods and services they like more?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's good. I also think it has, I think the permanence of it is what's the negative part of it. That being that, say, if I go to, a mom and pop shop and I have a bad experience there, I can start telling everyone about my bad experience and then they won't go. But then if they do happen to go, um, you know, years later and they've improved their processes and they're much better, then that reputation, they have a path to redemption when it comes to their reputation, whereas a couple bad scores could give you a scarlet letter for life when it comes to the digital platforms just because they're permanent. And so it's also easy for, a mob to bring down, a company just based purely on some type of gripes that they have with them that have nothing to do with their actual service. And, it could be a personal conflict or something like that, where they can then use the internet to smear their reputation. And there's really no way to come back from that. That would be what I
This
fear. But
this leads into two interesting points. One of them being review bombing, a sensation that's kind of taken over in the last few years when, say, Marvel does something with a character that the fan base doesn't really like. So they just go on there, everyone gives it 1 star reviews. And that can literally tank companies. It's not going to tank Disney, but one review bomb because, say, you made a character gay, that can literally ruin your reputation as a company. The second one is even more interesting, I believe. It's the practice of companies forcing employees to go on there on websites like Glassdoor and forcing them to give good reviews about their company.
right, exactly. It does really create a moat in the sense where if you already have an established large corporation, it makes it much more difficult for an up and coming company to eventually compete with you just because you have that many resources that you can deploy towards giving yourself the best score on, say Yelp or whatever type of review platform versus someone who's, maybe an independent contractor or an independent mom and pop shop who actually have to rely on real reviews. As we know, some people are good, honest people, other people are just idiots who like to complain about things. And so the people who are actually deploying resources towards giving themselves a better online reputation are bound, without a doubt, to have a better overall score, which just furthers their advantage that they have over
And
others.
and which company is the algorithm going to bump up? Are they going to bump up big corporation X with 100,000 reviews, average score 4.7 out of 5.0, or are they going to bump up mom and pop shop Y that has 12 reviews and a 3.7 average rating?
Exactly, exactly. Yep, that's the problem that we're seeing now. And as we get more digitized, we might run into more and more of of that problem, where eventually it just becomes a major part of every business. Is that is the new marketing tool, is to just get yourself a good review by any means necessary, and those who have the most resources to do so will do so, and those who rely on the opinions of people who most likely don't know what they're talking about may suffer when they don't deserve to.
And then how about artificial algorithm boosting, right? We were talking about this the other day where say on a social media website, you have a couple videos or a couple pictures blow up, you start getting a little bit famous, you start getting a little bit of natural traction. The algorithm will artificially bump you up, show you to more people, give you fake uh, likes and ad and revenue, things like that. And then they pull the plug on it and say, hey, if you want to boost visibility, pay X amount for a subscription.
Right. And now we're getting into that. That's where a big problem lies is, I mean, the underlying problem there is that any platform is centrally controlled, where, like you said, a platform like TikTok or Facebook, they own all of the data, they own all of the content that's posted on there. As a content creator, we actually don't own the content that we're posting. If we post this on YouTube, YouTube owns that content, and they can use their algorithms to promote it or to suppress it. The problem being there is that it's somewhat unchecked and it's somewhat unfair to everyone. Yet no one really has a say in it because it's a private company. So even if all of the content creators on YouTube all agree that this is bogus, and all of the consumers on YouTube, the people who are watching the videos, all also agreed that this is bullshit, there's nothing really holding YouTube accountable to change it unless everyone were to decide, okay, we're not going to use YouTube anymore. We're going to go to a different platform. And that's what happened in, I believe it was 2020. Yeah, it was. It was right after the whole January 6th thing happened and Trump got banned from all these platforms. And a lot of his supporters chose to leave. Other prominent conservative figures got banned. And that's when the platform Rumble uh, took a big boost because they all went over there. Or Trump started his own version of Twitter, True Social. But the problem is that it's like, okay, are we really going to try to compete with Twitter or with YouTube because they have such a wide moat and a wide network effect where they've been around for so much longer? It's really impossible to come up with another platform that's going to compete with them.
So
And
two points again. When people change off of one platform and go to another one because they don't like what they're seeing, and everyone of that ideology switches, that's just a horrible, horrible domino effect into echo chambers of,
right,
well, I don't like what I'm hearing and seeing here. I'm going to go hear and see things that I agree with. Then you only ever see things that you agree with. You never learn the other side for anything. Maybe you don't listen to podcasts like this that, inform you on both sides. And, it's, you just don't get all of the information that you should. So, secondly, my question would then be, do you think social media giants should be privately owned, or do you think they should be socialized, wherein, you know, multiple people have say in the guidelines, where
I
it's
think
not
they should,
just a privately owned individual?
I think they should be ran on a blockchain, which I think they will be eventually.
I like that. I mean, if everyone can hear and see the transparent rules as the blockchain would provide, it wouldn't just be a shadow banning system of, oh, Elon doesn't like the way these people talk, and Zuck doesn't like the way these people talk, and so they don't get boosted on their platforms.
Right, exactly. And one thing is you think about getting banned from a platform like Twitter, a platform like YouTube, and you think, oh, well, yeah, that sucks. Um, I can't go on and watch YouTube videos anymore, right? But I mean, if you think about it, a lot of people, their business is social media, and they've spent years and years accumulating millions of followers and building up their brand, and they've got all of their content on there. Suddenly, their account gets deleted by a authoritarian force, and that was the big problem with Jack Dorsey when they were running Twitter and they were on Joe Rogan with Tim Pool, and Tim Pool was challenging him on that, and they basically said, hey, it's our company and we have our terms and conditions, and if our users choose not to follow those terms and conditions, then they get banned. The counter to it was, well, look, these are utilities that are now, I mean, Twitter is the
A
marketplace for
public, a public,
discourse.
a public space. Yes.
Yeah, right. And it's influencing elections, it's influencing people's opinions, it's influencing almost everything when it comes to online life. Now, not everything in real life, but still, it has a large influence on the culture, everything. And for the owner and CEO and top executives at Twitter to have the control to change and alter the terms and conditions and then punish people who may have violated a new term before that term was implemented. So if YouTube wanted to, they can start a rule right now that says no page is named Modern Symposium, and then go back and say, oh, you broke the rule. You started a page called Modern Symposium, and then boot us off, even though that rule wasn't in place when we started the page. And there's no one holding them accountable to that because they're under the guise of this is a private business. If you don't like it, learn to code and build your own, which is nonsense.
Right. And this kind of goes off. I think we were talking about this an episode or two ago. Apple has so much power with just the App Store. If I think 50% of Americans, something like that, own iPhones as their cell phone. If Apple doesn't want your app on the App Store, you just don't get on there and you just don't get downloads. Or like you said, they had the was it Steam? I'm not sure. They had like the free engine for you to create games, and then they would just steal your game idea, boot you off their platform, and take it for themselves.
Right, exactly. And that's a flaw in any platform-based company, which is a lot now in the digital age. And getting back to looking towards the future, one of the big things I fear here is that as we get more and more digital and digitization of everything begins to take over, this problem will map itself over a lot of new things that it never has before. Think about Tesla. We've got a Tesla is not so much a car in the traditional sense; it's more of a computer with wheels on it. But they still have the same availability as all these other digital platforms do. Tesla, in a way, is a platform. So if Tesla wants to, they can, do pretty much anything they want as far as, limiting your capacity or capabilities and, or, giving certain privileges to certain people. And there's really no way to enforce that because it's such a new thing that it hasn't been implemented into government yet. And so that's a problem we're going to see. Another thing is the VR headsets. I mean, these things are going to get better and better. I'd be willing to bet that 10, 20 years down the line, as common as an iPhone is now, whether it's Apple, Meta, Google, someone's going to have a pair of glasses that are going to look no different from the ones you're currently wearing. And that's going to be your digital device. Now, this thing is mapped onto your face. Your entire view of the world is now digitized in some form of augmented reality. And the damage that could be done there, if that's centrally controlled, could be tremendous.
Yeah, that's a horrifying idea. Is everyone having augmented reality available at the tips of their fingers that is controlled by one person, by one powerful group of persons? That's just total world changing order, new world order, brave new world esque
Mhm.
terrifying thoughts of
I mean, that's the Matrix right there.
dystopian future, the Matrix.
That's
Exactly.
that's the Matrix right there. I mean, we already can see too on social media alone how altered a lot of people's versions of reality are when these algorithms start only giving you content that's one-sided. And so, you've got a certain amount of people out there who are thinking, Trump is just the new Hitler. And then you've got other people out there thinking, well, Trump's the savior. It's actually the Democrat. And it's like these people aren't even agreeing on the facts because social media is altering reality. Now, this is just a 2D version of reality that's on your phone. Imagine if this is now a 3D world that we're living in where everything you see is digital.
Digital AI generated
Hmm.
and in three dimensions for you to look, see, hear, touch, and smell. Yeah,
Right.
terrifying. I also wanted to bring up you were speaking about Teslas about, and so I remember this about cars. Uh, I don't know if Tesla is doing this. I do think BMW is doing this, but it's subscription based services for your car. So you
Tesla
bought
is doing this too, by the way. Tesla has the full self driving is on a subscription model. But sorry,
you
go ahead.
you purchased your car with seat warmers. Oh well, actually, if you want to keep the seat warmers running for the next 6 months, that's going to be another €60. Actually, if you want the moonroof to be able to open and close with the 360-degree axis turning, it's actually going to be another $40. Just craziness. Back to you will own nothing and be happy. They're literally trying to get you to pay to borrow every aspect of your existence.
Exactly. And that's the business model that makes the most sense in the digital world because we are no longer working with a finite amount of products. So say like the subscription model for Tesla currently, I know it is the self-driving. So you can have a Tesla, you could drive it around. But if you want it to drive itself, you can do that, but you have to pay a monthly subscription because that's a digital mechanism. And the thing about the digital mechanism is there's no finite supply of it. That's like saying, there, a subscription for something that is infinitely available is really the only way to make money from it because it throws off the supply and demand aspect where when you have an infinite supply, what happens to all of the economics of this market? You know what I mean? We've always been taught supply and demand, supply and demand. But what happens when supply is infinite? Because it's just digital. There is no finite amount of the supply. Everyone can look at it at the same time, and the only way that it makes sense to make money off that is to block access to it unless you pay me the monthly fee.
Right, keeping things behind paywalls is basically the only way to keep your product from just being consumed without any sort of revenue.
Which may be the better model in some cases for humanity, just because it does change the market dynamics so that we're no longer the product. If you've got to pay for Twitter now rather than getting it for
Mhm.
free, well, the good thing is that
Being
you're no
data
longer the
mined
product,
to all oblivion so that ads can be specially proct. Oh, how
but they're
about
probably still doing that too. But
how about
it's a
how
step
about
in the
the
right
fact
direction.
that if in this conversation with my phone next to me, if I bring up some sort of uh energy drink or hydration drink, I guarantee you, more likely than not, within the next couple days, I will get an ad on some social media platform about that beverage. I've
Yeah,
had it
no,
happen many
it's
times. I think everyone experiences this. And this
yep,
is just
same
kind
here.
of something that you see it jokingly online a lot. It's like, oh, haha, this is kind of funny that this is happening. You see jokes like uh, girlfriends going over to their boyfriend's phones being like, 3 carat, 2 carat, diamond opal, white gold, right? Like, trying to get ads to pop up for engagement rings on the boyfriend's phone. How was people not blown up in outcry over this?
Yeah, no, it's exactly, and no one seems to care that much. Um, I mean that yeah, I've experienced it as well. Megan wanted this Alexa for Christmas, and now we have it sitting in our kitchen, and the damn thing's listening to everything I say. It's fine. I mean, it's like Big Brother. I hate it, but it is the reality now is that we're just in a permanent. I mean, that's what I mean is we're already there. Like it's not people think of this like mass surveillance state future is as being so far off, but we're already there. It just hasn't really stuck yet for a lot of people, I don't think. And it's going to keep getting more and more, more and more invasive, because it's going to be more and more in our lives. I mean, if you're wearing the glasses, they see everything you see. They follow you around all day. You've got a self-driving car. It sees everything. It's. I feel like the digital age is transforming from a 2D version that we would see on screens to a 3D version that is with us here in our 3D world everywhere we go, and collecting data all the while. And so that's definitely where we're headed. And it seems to me, if I were to guess, it's more likely to result in negative result for humanity than a positive one, or positive sides to it. But it's really going to come down to who's in charge of regulating it and who's in charge of setting up the system in a way where people don't suffer from it.
People like to ask, when will we merge with technology? When will we be one with a computer? It's already happened. I can't
Yes,
go
agreed.
anywhere without my phone. That thing is my GPS, my compass, my communication, my information. It's everything. If that thing is not in my pocket, a part of me is missing as a functional human in society.
Right, agreed. That reminds me of a quote. I think it was from The Matrix when Neo and some other guy are sitting in there and they're waiting for the robots, the machines that are coming to kill them, and they're waiting for them. They know they're coming, and they're sitting around and they're looking out at their refrigerators and their weapons and their air conditioners and all that type of stuff. And he says, "Yeah, what's the difference?" One of them says, "What's the difference between these machines we have here and those machines that are coming to kill us?" And the other guy says, "Well." those machines we don't have any control over. These ones we have the off switch. We can just turn them off. And then the response to that is, well, can we really? Because if we turn them off, we don't have any food. We don't have any way of communicating. We don't have any way of transporting ourselves or our goods. We don't have any way of living in the way that we do. And most of us have never lived any other way. And so we have no idea, like we've talked about in the last podcast, if we were just thrown out into the wild right now, we would have no idea what the hell we're doing. We don't know how to make fire. We don't know how to do all this. And so realistically, do we have control over these machines? I would say no. And I would say there's really no way for humanity to do anything about it because if they were to all shut down right now, we'd be toast.
We are far more reliant on machines than machines are on us.
Hmm.
That much is certainly true.
Right.
Now,
And that's, all right, go ahead, sir.
uh, you go ahead.
I was going to say that's another point on that is when it comes to war. And you know, a lot of historians and people look back and say it's pretty crazy that ever since the nuclear weapons were developed, there's really been no big wars. I mean, we had two world wars right after each other. Before that, it was just constant war all the time. And since then, there hasn't really been any major wars. There's been minor invasions and aggressive military maneuvers by countries, but there hasn't been any massive wars up until, I mean, maybe Israel Palestine might be considered that. But other than that, I mean, for the past 60, 70, 80 years. And the reason why is partially, at least, because there is actually war going on, but it's not war we're familiar with. It's not ground war. We're not invading countries, but what we are doing is we're having cyber wars. Because what would harm a country more is if we came in and invaded them with, on the ground troops, we would lose a lot of our guys. We'd
And
spend a
and
lot
you
of
and you
resources.
totally unify a country at that point. Everyone
Right.
is completely and utterly unified. What's the bigger number, five or one?
Hmm.
Five, one.
Right. And yeah, and the modern warfare, I think, is cyber warfare where, hacking into digital systems, social media propaganda, manipulation, that type of thing, and that we know is going on. There's bots everywhere that are, foreign governments running them with the intention of dividing people. It's very common and it is a form of warfare in our modern in our modern world here.
Absolutely. It's much easier to take an enemy down, to let an enemy take itself down from within than it is to try and come in and conquer it. Like we just said, you unify a people, you give them a common enemy, all that derision goes away. All of that at each other's throats, that political divide goes away. It's now us versus them, which is what they want to do to you. They want to make us versus them in your own domestic country.
Exactly.
We got the break coming up here. Stick around for the philosophy behind building the just city.
All right, and we're back. So we left off on cyber warfare, and over the break, we're thinking about it. And the thing that's most scary, I think, about cyber warfare is that currently we're seeing it on a lot of social media platforms. We've got bots that are manipulating the discourse and pushing propaganda. As the world gets more and more digital, and these digital spheres are mapped onto real life, what happens when everything is digital, and there's now a vulnerability for foreign governments to use cyber warfare, not just to send you propaganda that's going to divide the populace, but instead maybe they can hack into your Tesla and shut down all of the self-driving cars, or they can hack into our infrastructure and shut down all of our things. Like we talked about, I mean, without all of our technology, a lot of us would be pretty much useless. And I think, if anything, that's probably the most efficient way to attack a country. Wouldn't be to send your troops over to invade, but would be to shut down their digital infrastructure.
Think I didn't even think about shutting down cars, shutting down water filtration plants, shutting down food production. That's horrifying for sure. The thing I had thought about was political misinformation at that point. They hack into our they hack into Twitter, just say, and they start tweeting out from the then sitting president's account things like start rounding up all of this ethnic group, how do people know what's true? That was the scariest thing for me, that I had been thinking about for a cyber attack. But they wouldn't even need to do that if everything is on the same system. They get into the system, they can shut down the entire country overnight.
What if they hack into Chase Bank?
And everyone's credits and debts are all gone, misconstrued.
These days, all our money is just numbers on a screen.
What
What
if they
happens
gave
when?
what if they gave everyone $100 million?
Yeah, exactly. There's so many ways that the digital the digital sphere is just, I mean, I'm willing to bet it's probably very, very secure, but just one minor, they call them, I can't think of what they call them, but one minor vulnerability in the security, and someone can hack in and get all the info. You hack into the Pentagon, you hack into, so many different, very dangerous, dangerous systems that would give you the ability to shut down a country real quick.
What's the more dangerous thing that we could lose? Our information, our banking system, or our infrastructure, such as food, water, transportation services?
I would almost say, I'd almost say when one goes down, the others go with
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Because it's all kind of one interconnected system. Say they shut down the information. Say no one can access the internet, but all of the companies, all the banks, all the infrastructure's up and running. Well, when no one can access the internet, all of the
How do trucks get to and fro, right?
right production shuts down, the economy shuts down, and then the infrastructure is useless. If the infrastructure goes down, the economy is kind of the economy is really not in its own, and when I say economy, I mean our bank accounts, right? So say our bank accounts weren't actually directly touched, but another large system like our infrastructure or our information systems were to get shut down. The financial system is less of a system on its own and more so a measurement of how the other systems are doing. And so that goes down, and then once that goes down, all the other systems probably go down with it because there's no longer a reliable mechanism to incentivize anyone to do anything.
Is a cyber attack America's biggest vulnerability probably at this stage?
I think so. And the reason I think so is because, one of the main things, and people have said this for so long, and this is one of those things that people don't catch on to the what changes. And so in America here, we feel very safe all the time. Why do we feel very safe all the time? It's
Two big
because
oceans.
we have two big oceans. Our geography is insanely advantageous to us, and we also have one of the most powerful not one of the most powerful military that's ever existed ever. We spend
Yes.
all of our money on building up our military, and for a long time, that gave Americans a sense of safety. The problem is, it doesn't matter how badass our military is when it comes to cyber warfare. What it really comes down to is how good our hackers are. And it's much easier for another country to start training up all of their people to become really good hackers. Now, all of a sudden, all of the huge tanks and guns and nukes we have don't mean shit because they could just hack into our system.
If the computer chip in our fighter jets don't work, what good is that fighter jet?
Right. And that's one of the reasons when we talk about modern warfare here, too. I mean, we've got two ongoing wars. We've got Israel and Palestine, and we've got Ukraine and Russia. I think neither of those are the most important war that we need to keep our eye out for. I think the war over Taiwan will be. That'll be the big one. And the reason why being is that Taiwan makes all of our chips and all of the world's chips, at least, a very large percentage of the market. That is a hotspot. Of course, China wants ownership over Taiwan, and of course, we're pretending to be over there because we care about their democracy and we care about their freedom. We don't give a shit about any of that. Our troops are over there because if China were to take over the biggest producer of semiconductors in the entire globe, suddenly we're at a huge disadvantage on the global scale. At least that's my theory.
I think you're totally right. Um, Control over those, I believe they have very rare metal deposits. I think cadmium possibly is one of them. I think it's a very specific type of mineral used in semiconductors and computer chips. Uh,
Silicon is one as well.
Silicon for
Um,
sure. Control over that supply is massive, and the United States has never been not transparent about protecting what it thinks is its resources abroad.
right. And
That,
and I'm
that's
not
that's why
100%
we have
sure.
military bases in every country.
Exactly. Yeah.
Our
That at the
economic
end of the day,
interests. It's
at the
not
end of the
because
day, it's
it's
all
not because
economic,
we're
right?
terrified of Italy or someone, striking us. It's because, hey, by the way, we have a huge ass military facility right by you. So let's keep these trade relations good, right?
Exactly. And yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what military is 100% about is not it's not about I mean, it's about protecting us, but then the reason we have military bases in every other country isn't to protect the citizens of those countries, it's to protect our economic interests in those countries. And when it comes to Taiwan, I'm not 100% sure on their resources. I'm sure the reason that Taiwan is became what it is probably because they had some advantage when it came to resources. But currently, the company Taiwan Semiconductor has massive facilities where they produce. I don't want to give numbers because I'm not 100% sure, but I want to say it's about 50%, maybe 40% of the global supply of computer chips, and that company has the most efficient equipment that's used to make them. No other company can really compete with them. And so that company alone, I mean, it's kind of insane to think about when we talked about how big corporations have gotten and how these corporate guys have more power than governments. Taiwan Semiconductor, you've got two of the biggest nations when it comes to global power. They're fighting over a company when it comes down to it. And so it's kind of an insane time. And Taiwan's a small island with not a large population, and so they might find themselves in the middle of an absolute smackdown when it comes to China and the USA if it does ever get to that point.
Power over spice is power over all.
Exactly.
Little Doom quote for you.
Hmm.
Um, do you think it's right that we have military bases in most other countries?
It's a good question. Um, well, I think it's yes. Well, when it comes to right, maybe not, but when it comes to do I think we should, in a lot of cases, I think we should because there's always a bigger fish, and I do think that not in all cases by any means, but I do think that the underlying, what do you want to call them, morals or the underlying principles of, American culture and American ideas is one of the better ones when compared to some others. And if it weren't for us being there, it would likely be someone else being there. And so when it comes to, protecting the rights of civilians, I mean, we fight for democracy. Don't get me wrong.
Mm, mm,
I mean, we do that.
mm.
We do that, but our motives are not. from altruism. They're from, you know,
We have overthrown at least double digit democracies in order to install an authoritarian ruler to then provide us with the natural resources from their country.
what's an example?
All over Central America. The term banana republic that comes from America coming in, overthrowing their democratically elected leader, installing an authoritarian regime to then send us produce back. That's what a banana republic is.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm sure that's a valid case. And but when I say we fight for democracy, you're right. It's kind of a nonsense statement, but we do fight for democratic principles. Whereas it's actually a huge paradox. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. But there's many cases where we represented democracy back in the Cold War, say, after World War II. We represented democracy while the Soviet Union and the KGB represented a communist form of government. Now, there'd be other countries. Italy was one, West Germany was one. There was a few others where there was elections going on where one of the candidates was a democracy candidate and the other one was more of a communist candidate. And so in order to protect the democracy candidate, we went and interfered with the election. So it's like it I guess that is true. We don't actually fight for democracy, but we do fight for democratic principles to be installed into countries. But by doing that, it is anti-democracy to do that. So it
How
is
about our democratic beliefs in the UN, where 200 some countries voted for a ceasefire in the Israel Palestine war, and we used our power of veto to say no?
right. And yeah, and
How democratic is that?
that's another yeah. I mean, that's another example. I didn't know about that one, but no, and yeah, we're definitely no angels for sure. And to say that we're um any better than you know we're not over in these other countries because we care about the people. We are over there because it's in our economic interest to do so. I guess my only point being is that I don't think at the same time that we're a bunch of genocidal maniacs who are going to, um, you know, destroy the rights of, destroy human rights in an area just to mine some lithium from their mines there. I don't think that that's necessarily what we're doing, but it is in a way what we're doing. But I think we would give these countries more rights and more freedoms, and we would invade on their freedoms less than say a communist dictatorship would if they were the ones who were put in place there.
I mean, we already exploit third world countries for their resources. I don't really know how much worse a communist regime would be than the current capitalist regime that's taking all of their resources for ourselves. I mean,
Well,
countries,
I'll put it. Let me say when we say exploit, yes, we do, but we engage in trade with them. So we're not going over there and putting a gun to their head and telling them, give us all your stuff. We're going over there and we're saying, hey, here's the deal. It's an unfair deal. You're getting the shit end of it. We're getting the better end of it. But at the
you
same time, we're not going to kill all
know
your
what we
civilians
actually
because of
do?
it.
We don't put a gun to their heads. We put a gun in their hands, tell them, go destroy your opposition, and then come back to us with good trade relations. That is our foreign policy.
Yeah. Would you say that what if we were to stop doing that today? Do you think that the world would be a better place?
I don't know. I think it'd be a worse place for Americans because we wouldn't have, as great of economic prosperity without, exploiting foreign countries. Um,
Do you think it'd be better for
I,
those foreign countries that we exploit?
I don't know. For a lot of them, probably not. Despotism is basically human nature. Um, but I do think that eventually some leaders would crop up that would then be able to drive forward, you know, political change, economic change. I think it's not that third world countries are so backward that they haven't been able to take a leap forward like the rest of the world. I think that they've just been handed the shit end of the exploitation stick for the last 200 years.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, a lot of it is just resources too. I mean, you can't expect a country with minimal resources to grow and prosper to the level of a country that has a ton of natural resources. And then, that's back in the day. Like the Middle East is a good example. Oil was not a valuable resource at all until the industrial age. So they were sitting on a gold mine, didn't realize it. All of these other countries had the resources that were valuable back then, were able to build themselves up into these superpowers. And then when oil was discovered in the Middle East, guess what? The Middle Easterners don't stand a chance because we're just going to go over there and take it from them. But I mean, to be fair, if you look at like Saudi Arabia and some of these countries, they are very wealthy, except for that wealth is all accumulated at the top, where they're making their bucks off of it too. It's just that their people aren't seeing it, and part of that is because they didn't have the old natural resources, therefore they were behind when it came to the governance systems that we see over here in the West.
It's similar to what we did with Native Americans, though I did see something. This was interesting. The term Native American may be a profane term because, all right, take the two words of Native American. First off, is native. And while they were here longer than us, they weren't native to this region, right? They came over from the Bering Strait land bridge in Asia, just as basically no one in the world is native to anywhere besides, people still living in the Fertile Crescent. So native isn't technically right. And then the word American certainly probably shouldn't be used to describe them, considering that's like the
It wasn't
third.
called America.
It's like the third white dude that discovered this part of the world was Americo
Yeah, right.
Vespucci. So naming them after that guy also doesn't seem correct. Moving on. Do you see the movie Killers of the Flower Moon?
No, I haven't yet. I've seen a lot of ads for it.
Awfully good. Scorsese. But it's about a tribe of Native Americans who were given land out in the West. They were like kicked around for years and years, like, oh no, like you can't have this part, you can't have this part. Eventually, the government settles them on this part in the West, and it's an absolute gold mine of black gold oil. So when it was discovered that oil was there, this Native American tribe became uber rich, and then eventually, it starts becoming like white people trying to go in there, take it over, intermarry, and like steal like the oil back away from them essentially. But like you were saying, resources are a big part of wealth generation, and it's always been a game between the strong and the weak about who gets the resources.
Right. And it's human nature to, I mean, it's been going on for a long time, and it's human nature, as we know, to always want more. So when you have these massive superpowers, it's going to happen where we're going to go over and we're going to try to capitalize on the resources that other countries have. And in some ways, I think that we have done it acceptably. Other ways, I think we haven't. And same goes for, even like British imperialism. There was some places where it was done in, I think, an acceptable manner. There was a lot of places where it wasn't. But it is also hard to judge because the culture and the principles are different in all of these regions. So we can come in and we can try to use our influence. There's a lot of times where we go into these, different nations and try to use our influence to build up a city or a nation state there that's based on our culture and our idea of what's right.
I was going to
But
ask
theirs
you,
might be different.
is that philosophically, and this is obviously no, can't nail this down. This is ethics. Is that a morally right thing to do for a civilized, a quote unquote civilized culture to come into a quote unquote less civilized culture, try and spread their ideas, show their form of governance, their form of economics? Is that a morally right thing to do or not?
Generally, I think no. I think, if it was a perfect world, the answer would be no. But the problem lies where if we don't, who will? And we believe I believe this because I was born in America and I lived in America. Of course, I'm going to believe this. It's ingrained into me. I believe that our culture and our principles as Americans are superior in a way to other cultures and other principles of foreign nations. Now, is that a result of just being raised with a bias in seeing constant American propaganda? Of course it is, right? But the people who are in charge and running it also have those same biases. So that their justification to themselves is we're coming in here because if we don't, the Soviet Union will, and the Soviet Union, those are the boogeyman communists. So what would be better for these people as if they were raised in a democratic in quotes capitalist society where everyone has the same equal rights and you can build yourself up your own empire and you can have the freedom of speech and all these things, or would it be better if the evil communists came in? And that's our American perspective. Now, from the Soviet Union's perspective, it's the opposite. It's saying, oh, we have uh, an egalitarian society where everyone's equal. We should go bring that over to these countries. Otherwise, those greedy capitalists from America are going to come over and exploit their labor. So both sides are in their own minds justifying their actions, and it's less of a battle between us and the natives to these countries that we're going into. It's more of a battle between us and the other superpowers that we're competing with for those resources, which is a very fucked up idea to begin with. Like I'm not in favor of any of it. We should just leave those guys alone. But that's where it is, and that's the justification of it. But when it really comes down to it, it is a philosophy question, and it's even if we could say me and you were in charge and we were running it, and we said, okay, we don't want one of these authoritarian dictators to come in and take advantage and exploit these less privileged countries. Let's go in there and let's do it ourselves, and let's make sure that it's morally just. How would you build the just city or the just nation state?
Right. And that's the underlying philosophy of this whole debate. It's how do you protect people? What's the best way to protect people, right? Is it morally just to go into a country and set up infrastructure and hospitals, right? All right, infrastructure. Everyone would agree that's a good idea, right? You can take your product, your resources from one spot, bring it to another spot where you don't have that resource, right? Infrastructure is a great idea. Medicine, hospitals, everyone agrees that setting up hospitals is a good idea and that setting up ways to serve and protect people is a good idea. But is it morally justified to bring that to people without their consent? I I I don't know. The
I don't
answer
think
is
so.
if you're altruistic, maybe. If you truly go in there and fix everything perfectly, that sounds great.
But
But we
also,
do,
who are you? You
but
know,
right, but who am I to decide how
yeah,
this place should be run? Right.
someone can walk into my house right now and tell me, "Hey, you've got your TV up on this wall. You should have it over on this wall. Move
Right.
your bed over here. Look at what you got in your fridge. No, you don't want that. Throw it in the garbage. You want this." And I'll say, "Who the hell are you? Get the hell out of here." And I can see that. In that case, I don't think it's morally justified at all. But the problem is that it's just a game of it's game theory. It's if we don't, someone else will, and so it's almost an invisible hand forcing our country to do so, which sucks, but it's also very difficult to place the blame single-handedly on one person or one entity. Um,
Because you want to be the one to go in there and spread your ideology because you believe in your ideology, like you were just saying.
right,
Like you said 5 minutes
right,
ago, you were born to believe that free markets are the way to go and that rugged individualism is what raises society, and other cultures were raised to believe it's like the collective uh purpose of everyone to provide for everyone and thus hopefully raise the standard of living for people, right? And
right.
it just becomes that question of not is your ideology right, but is it right to enforce your ideology?
Right, exactly. Yes. And I think that's one of the main things. And I think that's one of the things that America does domestically, at least, it does a wonderful job of. At least in the way that the system is designed in a very rigid constitution, and a rigid set of checks and balances on our government, we do a great job, at least our founding fathers did, and at least the people who come before us did, of building up a system that does not allow ideology to be enforced onto people who disagree with it, which is why we're able to have, some of the ideological differences that are causing huge debates right now in America. That's kind of a bad result of a very good thing, which is that we do have the ability to do that where if a very extreme but convincing ideology were to find itself in the hands of power, it would not be able to do much, just based on the way our government's built, and that's a good thing. Um, I also want to go ahead, sorry.
Rule number one, I would then say, of us building our just city, free reign to have your own ideology, right? Free speech, spread of ideas, and hopefully a plethora thereof.
Yes, I agree with that,
All
and
right, we have our first rule.
agree with, and not only that freedom to have your own opinion, but it's less of a freedom and more of a restriction. It's a restriction on the government because when they,
To and it to say to not be able to say that is a wrong ideology.
to infringe on your rights.
We will not allow people to spread those ideas.
Right, and that's what the whole kind of the philosophical element of it was, which is these are natural rights given to us by God, which that's the phrase that they use when building this system was the freedom of speech is not given to you by anyone. You have the freedom of speech already. The problem is that when these authoritarian governments and dictators come in, they infringe upon your freedom and take it. So the government does not give you the freedom of speech. This government restricts others from taking it from you,
One one
no matter their power.
one point of clarification: we hold these truths to be self-evident,
Exactly.
not God-given. We wrote in our Constitution that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Well, at least all white landowning men are created equal.
Back then, but we've not, I think I mean, that's a whole nother debate. I won't get into it. I did just kind of think of this too as we were talking. Um, we started off this podcast with the question, as we look towards the future, what are the pros and what are the cons, right? And both of us agreed that one of the cons was that we've got all of these mega corporations, these tech giants who are just taking all of our data, and we've become the product in this situation. Now, the more I think about it, there, especially on a global scale, there may be a pro to this as well. And the pro being, look, Elon Musk has Starlink, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Starlink provides internet services to you know, impoverished countries in Africa, impoverished countries in the Middle East. Anyone has access to it for free. What would incentivize Elon Musk to do that? You know how much it costs to throw a bunch of satellites up into space that are then going to provide services to people who have no money to give for those services? Why would he do that? Because he wants their data. So now all of a sudden, even people who have nothing to give, no money to spend, who are in an impoverished third world country with nothing to trade to us as America, when I say us, I mean to the United States government or to United States companies with nothing to trade, what's going to incentivize the United States or China or a big powerhouse country like that to step in and help them? Well, all of a sudden with the digital age, they now do have something to trade because they're no longer trading money. Just like we don't trade money to go on Facebook, we trade our data. These people do have data to offer. And so even though it's a very, I mean, I think as a principle, it's kind of fucked up and not cool for um, us to be basically trading our own information for uh, Wi-Fi, but at least it is a step in the right direction when it comes to making the lives of some people better when there would otherwise be no incentive to do so.
What is the ultimate end goal for these tech giants in getting all of this data? What do you think they most want to do with it? Do you think the most useful thing for them is just to sell you more shit? I mean, that
No,
That would seem like a pretty rudimentary answer. What are your thoughts?
No,
What do you think the most useful thing from having data on hundreds of millions of people would be?
it's to build. It's to build AI. It's to build simulations. It's to build. I mean, data is everything nowadays. Data is the new gold. It's the new oil. AI gets better and better exponentially with the amount of data that's fed into it. And data is flowing into it at insane rates that we wouldn't even be able to keep up with. Um, everyone, all of these, a lot of these big tech guys, these are like sci-fi guys who are into, the idea of the singularity and the idea of simulation theory, and they're racing to be the ones who create the new simulation. As built into our DNA to never have enough. No matter how much you have, you want more. You want to be God. That's what they're racing for. And data is everything because data is knowledge and knowledge is power. And so no matter what the data is, they'll take it because it's free to take.
So you think it's towards building better computer functions, towards building like a more intelligent AI with more data points? You think that's what they're building towards?
I think that's what they're building towards right now, and I'm sure there'll be even more and more uses for it in the future. But what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, one very useful thing that you can start to glean from getting all this information is how people think. If you know how people think, you can predict what they will think. You can predict things for them. You can predict what they're going to want. You can predict who they're going to vote for. If you
Yeah,
know their last 1,000 Google searches were about, you know, left leaning ideology, you can then predict, who they're going to be voting for. Um, I
yeah,
think it's,
and that's what everything is. I mean, that's what all these companies are doing. When it comes down to it, the most valuable thing you can possibly have is to be able to predict the future. I can
yes.
predict what stocks are going to do well if I have enough data. I can predict what the next market is going to be. If I can predict the future, then I'm all powerful. And that's what they're able to do. And not only predict, I would also say influence.
Yeah.
Because when you know enough about someone, it'll catch their desire. Like the mercenary story that you gave a few episodes ago. If I know what that guy prefers, then I know what it is that I have to offer him to get him to do what I need him to do.
What carrot and sticks are going to be required to influence someone one way or another.
Yep.
Whether you need the strong influence of the stick or the more soft influence of the carrot. Now, everyone's different. Everyone responds differently to authority. Everyone has different desires. And I think that's kind of what this data driven economy is building towards, is trying to understand human psychology.
And I think it's also, I mean, there's probably many different uses for it depending on who it is. I think a lot of these guys are also using it to try to solve the mysteries of the universe. They're trying to find patterns, whether that's for personal financial gain. If I can find patterns, I might be able to link them to the economy and make wise financial decisions. Some of them are just curious, whereas there's a
It's
lot
not
of
all about
unsolved
money.
problems out there. Right. There's a lot of unsolved problems out there that could be solved with enough data. We could cure cancer if we get enough data on cancer. We can there's many things out there that are yet to be solved because we have not had adequate access to the data, which we now do.
And this plays into your theory behind it's a good thing there are billionaires. It might be a good thing that there's someone with 1 billion data points that they can then plug into a computer simulation and say, all right, what is the most likely outcome to defeat this cancer cell? That's a
Right.
pretty damn good thing for society if
Even if
if
even
that's
if
where
they
the
are
incentives of these people lie.
exactly, and even if they are the greediest bastards who ever lived, then they better figure out how to cure cancer because that's how they're going to make the most profit for themselves. That's why that's it. That's my primary argument for why that's a good thing. But yes, agreed.
All right. I think leaving this in a pretty good spot. What do you think, Richie?
Yep, I think so. I think it was a great conversation. I do think we should continue to have more conversations about the future as a starting point because we can go in
Yes.
100 different directions with this.
I mean, we
And yeah,
we barely even got into crypto today. That's certainly going to be a focus for future episodes. We barely even got into many other aspects of new digital age turning world order. I think this is a topic that one of the most important topics, maybe the most important topic to talk about. So I can definitely see us having more conversations in the future about this.
Agreed. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Catch us next time.